invite respected Emeritus Chairperson, Mahatma Gandhi University of Medical Sciences and Technology, Dr. N.S. Soankar sir, Chairperson cum Chancellor Dr. Vikas Chandra Soankar, Vice Chancellor Dr. Chowgurati sir, Vice Chancellor Dr. V.K. Kapoor, Dean Principal, Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Hospital, Dr. Andy Soni. On behalf of UGCR organizing team, I welcome you all to 22nd undergraduate combined rounds of Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Hospital. Today's our topic is pneumonia, which is one of the commonest disease of lungs. The presentation is prepared by undergraduate students and will be presented by them. Chairpersons for today's session are Dr. Aparna Garg is Professor and Head, Department of Physiology. Dr. Ved Prakash Mamodia is Professor and Head, Department of Microbiology. And Dr. Jitendra Jalutharia, Associate Professor, Respiratory Medicine. Now I would invite Dr. Jitendra Jalutharia for the brief introduction of pneumonia. Welcome.
A very good morning. My name is Dr. Jitendra. Respected Emeritus Chairperson sir, respected Vice Chancellor sir. In today's topic, pneumonia, it's a very common and very infectious disease of lung. This is a common infectious disease of lung is occurred due to inflammation and infection of alveolar sacs and alveoli in the lung, which result in accumulation of fluid, pus cell and inflammatory cells within the alveoli, which is result in impaired gas exchange in the lung. These all manifest as clinical signs and symptoms of breathlessness, cough, sputum production, chest discomfort, and chest pain. This is a very major global public health problem. Worldwide, estimated 400 to 450 million people affected annually because of pneumonia. This is a very common infection disease of death in children under age of 5 years. In India, each year, total 40 to 45 people affected by pneumonia, in which at least 3 to 4 million children under age are affected by pneumonia. When we talk about elderlies, age more than 65-year-old patient, there is at least 4 to 5 million people annually affected by pneumonia, and children are affected 3 to 4 million. Cases reported are 5 cases per thousand in population each year in age 65-year-old, which sharply rises till 40 cases per thousand per year annually in age more than 85-year-old patient. From last 20 years, from 2002 to 2025, we world witnessed multiple outbreak of pneumonia due to different etiology. Recently in 2019, COVID-19 pandemic is largest outbreak of viral pneumonia. Today we learn about clinical signs, symptoms, pathological changes, diagnosis method and management of pneumonia. Antibiotics play a crucial role of treatment in pneumonia, but due to continuously increase overuse and misuse of antibiotic, we develop multiple antibiotic resistance in normal population. So we should rationally use antibiotics and stick to antimicrobial distribution program to improve antibiotic and effective outcome of pneumonia treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to invite the presenter from anatomy to start the presentation.
Good morning, everyone, respected dignitaries, to all the respected faculty members, seniors, and my fellow batchmates. Today, I, Mohammad Junaid, MBBS Batch 2025, along with my batchmates Harshvardhan Lunawat, Mahi Gupta, Swastik Sharma, and Kritika Shekhawat, have prepared a presentation on the topic Gross Anatomy of Lungs and Bronchopulmonary Segments under the guidance of Dr. Pankaj Kumar Singh Sir, Professor and Head of Department Anatomy, and under the moderation of Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Sunil Singh Shekhawat Sir, Assistant Professor, Department of Anatomy. Following are the specific learning objectives. At the end of this presentation, you will be able to describe the external and internal structure of the lungs, including the pleura. You will be well versed with the term bronchopulmonary segments and its clinical significance. Identify the difference between the bronchopulmonary segments organization of the two lungs and its related applied aspects. So, lungs are paired, spongy, elastic organs primarily concerned with the function of respiration. They are rosy pink in color in infants and newborns, and as we gradually age, it becomes of mottled black appearance due to the deposition of inhaled carbon particles. In adults, the lung has spongy tissue. It crepitates on touch and is filled with air. While in fetuses and stillborns, the tissue is firm and is filled with fluid, and it does not crepitate on touch. Pleura is the outer membranous covering of the lungs. It can be divided into the parietal pleura and the visceral pleura. The parietal pleura can be further divided into the cervical pleura, the costal pleura, the mediastinal pleura, and the diaphragmatic pleura. Let's look into the external features of the lungs. The lung has an apex. It is the rounded, blunt superior end of the lung. It extends into the root of the neck, 3 cm superior to the anterior end of first rib, and 2.5 cm above the medial 1/3 of the clavicle. The base has a semi-lunar concave surface, and because it rests on the diaphragm, it is also referred to as the diaphragmatic surface. It has 3 borders. The anterior border, which is thin and sharp, and the right anterior border is more vertical than the left. The left anterior border presents a space, which is the cardiac notch. This space is occupied by the heart and the pericardium. The posterior border, which is thick, round, and ill-defined, it lies between the 7th cervical spine to the 10th thoracic spine. The inferior border, which is semi-lunar, and it separates the base from the surfaces of the lungs, which are the large, smooth, convex costal surface and the medial surface, which can be further divided into the small posterior vertebral surface and the large anterior mediastinal surface. And because the base, it rests on the diaphragm, it is also considered as a diaphragmatic surface. There are many structures passing in the mediastinum closely associated with the lung. And because lungs are soft tissue, these structures will hence leave their impression on them, such as in the left lung, there can be found impressions of the trachea and the esophagus, the arch of aorta, the left common carotid artery, the left subclavian artery, the descending aorta, and the left ventricle. While in the right lung, there will be impressions of the right brachiocephalic vein, the superior and inferior vena cava, the trachea and the esophagus, and right atrium. Looking into the fissures and lobe of lungs, both the lungs have an oblique fissure which divides them into the superior and inferior lobe. And in the right lung, a horizontal fissure develops starting from the oblique fissure and runs horizontally forwards to the margin of anterior border, dividing the right lung into superior, middle, and inferior lobe. The anterior border of the left lung, it presents a tongue-shaped projection below the cardiac notch. This is known as a lingula, and it corresponds to the middle lobe of the right lung. There can be certain anatomical variations, such as when the medial part of the superior lobe is separated by a fissure, and it contains the terminal part of the azygous vein, also referred to as the lobe of azygous vein. There can be presence of a horizontal fissure in the left lung in around 10% of the individuals. Hilum is an area on the mediastinal surface through which structures enter and leave the lung. The root of the lung is a short, broad pedicle. It connects the medial surface of the lung with the mediastinum. It consists of structures which enter and leave the lung through hilum. such as the principal bronchus in the left lung, and in the right lung, the principal bronchus divides into the eparterial and hyparterial bronchus present above and below the pulmonary artery. On the anterior-inferior side, superior and inferior pulmonary vein, one bronchial artery in the right lung and two in the left lung, two bronchial veins each, and the presence of the anterior and posterior pulmonary plexus. You will notice the extension of pleura, a tail-like projection. This is a pulmonary ligament. It is filled with adipose tissue and it basically serves as an anatomical dead space for the expansion of pulmonary vein during increased cardiac output. The internal structure of the lung, it is made up of the intrapulmonary bronchial tree, which is responsible for the conduction of air to and fro from the lung, and the pulmonary units, which are responsible for gaseous exchange within the lung. The trachea divides outside the lung at the level of the upper half of 6 thoracic vertebra into two principal bronchus, the right principal bronchus and the left principal bronchus. This will further divide into 3 lobar bronchi on the right side and 2 lobar bronchi on the left side respectively, which will divide into the tertiary or segmental bronchus, and then dividing into the 2 bronchioles, the respiratory bronchioles and the terminal bronchioles. These bronchioles lack cartilage in their walls and are made up of smooth muscles. When the trachea divides into the 2 bronchus, the right principal bronchus is more or less in line with the trachea. It only deviates at a small angle of 25 degrees from the long axis of trachea. While the left bronchus is somewhat oblique and it deviates at a larger angle of 45 degrees. The arterial supply of lung is done by 2 sets of arteries, the pulmonary arteries and the bronchial arteries. The pulmonary arteries arises from the pulmonary trunk, responsible for carrying the deoxygenated blood from the ventricles to the lungs for oxygenation, while the bronchial arteries are responsible for carrying the oxygenated blood, and the 2 bronchial arteries on the left side are derived from the descending thoracic aorta, and one bronchial artery on the right side is derived from the right third posterior intercostal artery. The venous drainage of the lung is done by 2 sets of veins, the pulmonary veins and the bronchial veins. There are 2 pulmonary veins in each lung, responsible for carrying the oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the heart. The 2 right bronchial veins drain into the azygous vein, while the left bronchial veins will drain into the hemiazygous vein. The lymphatic drainage of the lung is clinically important as the carcinoma of the lung spreads through the lymphatic path. The lymphatic drainage is done by 2 sets of lymph vessels, the superficial and deep lymph vessels. The lymph from these vessels will drain into the hilar or bronchopulmonary lymph nodes, which will then drain into the superior and inferior tracheobronchial lymph nodes present superior and inferior to the level of bifurcation of trachea, in turn draining into the paratracheal and pretracheal lymph nodes, ultimately draining into the right subclavian trunk and left thoracic duct. Lungs are innervated by both parasympathetic and sympathetic fibers. The parasympathetic fibers are derived from vagus nerve, responsible for bronchoconstriction, vasodilation, and increased mucus secretion, while the sympathetic fibers derived from T2 to T5 spinal segments are responsible for bronchodilation, vasoconstriction, and decreased mucus secretion. When we look at the histology of the lungs, the cellular arrangement changes from pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium in the intrapulmonary bronchus to simple columnar epithelium in the terminal bronchioles to simple squamous type in the alveoli. The alveolar ducts and alveoli present 2 types of cells. The type 1 pneumocytes, which are of simple squamous type and are responsible for gaseous exchange, and the type 2 pneumocytes, they are of cuboidal type and they produce a surfactant such as lecithin. It reduces the surface tension and prevents the alveolar walls from collapsing. A bronchopulmonary segment is an area of lung which is aerated by a tertiary or segmental bronchus. It is a well-defined anatomical, functional and surgical unit of the lung. They are divided by pulmonary septa formed from visceral pleura. Each segment has its apex facing towards the hilum and the base is directed downwards. So in case of any infection, if there is fluid accumulation, the patient is made to lay in a side lateral position so all the fluid accumulates towards the hilum and it can be easily suctioned out. There are 10 bronchopulmonary segments in each lung. while it may vary in the left lung due to the fusion of the apical and posterior segment or due to the fusion of the anterior basal and medial basal segments. Each segment has its own arterial supply and venous drainage. And why you will notice that the segmental branch of pulmonary artery is present inside the segment, the tributaries of the pulmonary vein are present intersegmentally. Let's look into some applied aspects related. We just discussed that there's a plane of septa dividing the bronchopulmonary segments. So if we need to resect it out in case of bronchiectasis or tumors or tuberculosis, it can be easily resected out without disturbing the arterial supply of any other segment because each has its own arterial supply. The trachea, when it divides into the two bronchus, as we discussed that the right bronchus is more in line. So if we aspirate any foreign body particle, it is more likely to go into the right principal bronchus and more commonly in the apical segment of the right lower lobe of the lung. As you can notice here in the X-ray of the chest, the foreign body presents as a radio-opaque opacity. Pneumonia is the acute inflammation of the lung parenchyma of respiratory bronchioles, the alveolar sacs or the alveolar ducts. It can be classified into the bronchopneumonia, which is the infection of the terminal bronchioles that can extend into the adjoining alveoli. The lobar pneumonia, which is the acute inflammation of a part of lobe of the lung or the entire lobe of either one or both the lungs. And the interstitial pneumonia, which is characterized by the inflammation of the lung tissue present between the air sacs. To quickly summarize, lungs are paired spongy organs related with the function of respiration. There are 2 lobes and 1 fissure in the left lung, and 3 lobes and 2 fissures in the right lung. There are 10 bronchopulmonary segments in each lung, while it may vary in left lung around 8 or 9 due to the fusion of certain segments. These are certain references. Thank you for your time.
Now, I would like to invite Lavanya from Department of Physiology to continue the presentation.
A very warm good morning to the respected dignitaries, faculty members, and my dear colleagues. Today, I, Lavanya Singh, on the behalf of the Physiology Department, am here to speak on the physiology of pneumonia. This presentation is prepared by me along with my fellow classmates Harshita Sharma, Jagriti Ahuja, Janvi Arora, and Lakshmi Rao. Under the guidance of the head and professor of the Physiology of Department, Dr. Aparna Garg, and under the moderatorship of the Associate Professor, Dr. Anita Jain. The alveolar capillary membrane is a structure which comprises of tissues that separate the alveolar air from the capillary blood. It consists of the following layers. The first layer is the surfactant and the fluid layer, which consists of a thin layer of fluid containing surfactant, and the next layer is the alveolar epithelium, which comprises of extremely flattened thin cells. Then the next layer is the epithelial basement membrane. Then the next layer is the interstitial space, which is a very thin tissue space which separates the epithelial basement membrane from the capillary basement membrane. Then the next layer is the capillary basement membrane, which often fuses with the epithelial basement membrane to form a structural, to provide structural stability. The next structure is the capillary endothelium. Gaseous exchange in the lungs is a vital process primarily occurring in the tiny air sacs called the alveoli. These alveoli are firmly covered by a dense network of pulmonary capillaries which form a structure which is essential for gaseous exchange. Its mechanism is as follows. The first step is ventilation, in which the atmospheric air, which is rich in oxygen, is inhaled into the tiny air sacs called the alveoli, inflating them. The next step is the perfusion, in which the deoxygenated blood, which is rich in carbon dioxide, reaches the surrounding capillaries. The next step is diffusion, in which as the oxygen partial pressure is high in the alveoli and it is low in the blood, so the oxygen will flow from the alveoli to the blood. Conversely, carbon dioxide, which is high in blood, will flow back to the alveoli. The factors affecting gases exchange include a thin alveolar capillary membrane, approximately 0.5 to 1 micrometer in thickness, a large surface area, approximately 70 square meters, adequate blood flow, which requires an extensive capillary network, optimal ventilation and perfusion ratio. The ventilation and perfusion ratio represents the relationship between the air reaching the alveoli, that is ventilation, and the blood flow to these alveoli, that is perfusion. This indicates how well air and blood are matched for gases exchange. The normal values, while the overall normal value is approximately 0.8, the ratio still varies throughout the lung due to the effect of gravity, resulting in the higher value of the ratio at the apex and lower of approximately 3 and lower value of the ratio at the base of approximately 0.6. At the apex, as the blood flow is low, ventilation is low but perfusion is much lower, which results in an overall increase in the ratio. And at the base, as the blood flow increases due to gravity, the ventilation is more but the perfusion is much greater, which results in an overall decrease in the ratio. Pneumonia is an infection of the lung parenchyma that causes inflammation and consolidation of alveolar spaces. This results in significant derangement of the gas exchange and the pulmonary function. And this condition affects approximately 450 million people globally each year and is the leading cause of mortality and morbidity. Impairment of gases exchange in pneumonia. Pneumonia disrupts gas exchange as, in response to the infection, the lung parenchyma becomes inflamed and the alveoli are filled with exudate, which is a mixture of fluid, pus, pathogens, and immune cells, which leads to alveolar capillary membrane thickening, reduced surface area, intrapulmonary shunting, and ventilation perfusion mismatch. The ventilation perfusion mismatch includes the following mismatch patterns. First is the low VQ or shunt-like, which is caused by conditions like pneumonia, asthma. High VQ or dead space, which is caused by conditions like pulmonary embolism and low cardiac output. Also, absolute shunt, in which the VQ ratio is equal to 0 because ventilation is not taking place. So the blood passes by unventilated alveoli. And absolute dead space, in which the VQ ratio is equal to infinite as perfusion is not taking place. So the air does reaches the alveoli, but the blood is not present. Pulmonary function test assess the impact of lung inflammation on breathing. In case of pneumonia, they reveal restrictive patterns like reduced FVC, FEV1 total lung capacity, and normal or increased FEV1 FVC ratio. The role of PFT in pneumonia management, even though they are not the primary diagnostic tools, they do evaluate the functional impact of the lung inflammation. They monitor the recovery, that is, they ensure that the lung function reaches the baseline after the treatment is being started. And they are used to monitor airway hyperresponsiveness and manage wheezing in children with pneumonia. Pneumonia is primarily diagnosed by chest x-rays, CT scans and physical examination, not by PFTs alone. To summarize, the gases exchange impairment in pneumonia happens due to thickened alveolar capillary membrane, reduced surface area from consolidation and intrapulmonary shunting. Low VQ regions result in hypoxemia or deoxygenation. Ventilation perfusion mismatch. Pneumonia creates VQ ratio equals to 0, that is, true shunting happens. Pulmonary function changes pulmonary function changes in pneumonia follow a restrictive pattern, that is low FVC with normal FEV1 and FVC ratio. Compliance reduction, that is decreased elasticity increases the work of breathing. These are some references used. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning, everyone, respected dignitaries, esteemed faculty members, and my fellow colleagues. I'm Divyanshi Papriwal, and I, along with my team members, are here to present on the topic pathological changes and stages of pneumonia under the guidance of Dr. Manju ma'am and under the moderatorship of Dr. Sangeeta ma'am. Let's begin by understanding what is pneumonia. Pneumonia is basically an inflammatory disorder of the lung parenchyma, which is most commonly infectious, in which the alveoli become filled with inflammatory exudate, which causes consolidation and impaired gaseous exchange. This leads us to the classification of pneumonia. So pneumonia can be classified on different bases. Firstly, on the basis of anatomic regions, pneumonia can be classified into lobar, bronchopneumonia, which is also known as lobular pneumonia, and thirdly, the interstitial pneumonia. Secondly, on the basis of clinical settings, pneumonia can be classified into community-acquired pneumonia, healthcare-associated pneumonia, which includes hospital-acquired pneumonia, and thirdly, the ventilator-associated pneumonia. Third, on the basis of etiology and pathogenesis, pneumonia can be classified into bacterial pneumonia and viral pneumonia. Some other types of pneumonia include non-specific interstitial pneumonia and cryptogenic organizing pneumonia. Let's discuss the pathogenesis of pneumonia. So, pneumonia can be caused due to inhalation or aspiration of pathogens, microbial proliferation in alveoli, activation of innate immune response, neutrophilic infiltrations plus exudation, alveolar consolidation which causes impairment in gaseous exchange, and dissolution and complications. So basically the bacterial pneumonia has two patterns that it shows. Firstly the lobar pneumonia and secondly the lobular pneumonia, which is also known as the bronchopneumonia. Let's discuss both of them. This is the differentiating image between the two, that is the lobar pneumonia and bronchopneumonia. As we can clearly see that in lobar pneumonia, an entire lobe is affected, or majority part of the lobe is affected. Whereas in bronchopneumonia, there are patchy consolidations that are visible on the lung. Let's discuss each one of them individually. Firstly, coming to the lobar pneumonia. As we have already discussed, it affects an entire lobe. It has uniform consolidation, and it is often caused by Streptococcus pneumoniae. As we can clearly see through the gross image, the arrow shows the lobar pneumonia. Stages of lobar pneumonia. So there are basically 4 sequential stages that are involved in lobar pneumonia. Those are congestion stage, red hepatization stage, grey hepatization stage, and dissolution stage. Let's discuss each stage. So firstly, the congestion stage. It basically occurs from 1 to 2 days, and grossly the lung node will be appearing red. It will present as heavy, boggy, and hyperemic due to engorged vessel and edema. It is clearly visible in the image that the red lung can be seen. Coming to the microscopy, we can clearly see from the left image that it is the normal histology of the normal lung, where we can see the alveoli and TB. Those are basically the terminal bronchioles. On the right side, we can see the lobar pneumonia, which basically contains, the alveoli contains pink serous fluid, few neutrophils, and scattered RBC. The next stage that we are going to discuss is the red hepatization stage. As the name suggests, hepatization, which basically means that the lung loses its air containing capacity and it starts to look like a lobe. So the lobe appears firm, solid, red liver-like, that is hepatized, and airless on the cut surface. We can clearly see the difference between the normal lung and the red hepatized lung from the image. Coming to the microscopy, so alveoli are packed with neutrophils, RBCs, and desquamated cells are visible in the microscopy. The third stage is the grey hepatization stage. Again, as the name suggests, grey, that basically means that the lung is now visible as greyish, and it contains granular texture, which is basically due to the RBC breakdown. In microscopy, we will be able to see the degenerating neutrophils, macrophages, and reduced RBC. The last and the fourth stage is the resolution stage. It occurs 7 days onward, and grossly, the lung returns back to its spongy and aerated consistency. In its microscopy, we'll be able to see the macrophages. So from the left image, we can clearly see there are circular cells. Those are the macrophages, and those basically help to clear the debris out. Second type of pneumonia that we are going to discuss is the bronchopneumonia, which is also known as the lobular pneumonia. It is characterized by patchy, suppurative inflammation of the lung, which is centered on the bronchi, bronchioles, and adjacent alveoli. In gross, we can see that on the left side, it is the normal lung, whereas on the right side, we can see the areas of consolidation, which shows a solid appearance. They may also show the patchy consolidations that are visible in bronchopneumonia. In microscopy, we will be able to see the inflammatory exudates that are present in the bronchiole, and we will be able to see inflammatory cells. Coming to the complications of pneumonia, if untreated, pneumonia can cause pleuritis, which is basically the inflammation of pleural cavity. It may cause abscess formation, which is due to the tissue destruction and necrosis. It may cause empyema, which is due to the spread of infection to the pleural cavity. And it can cause bacterial dissemination, which can be due to the heart, brain, and kidney. Other type of pneumonia that we can going to discuss on the basis of clinical settings is the community-acquired viral pneumonia. As we already know that during the year 2020, COVID-19 came across, and SARS-CoV-2, the agent of COVID-19, became the leading cause of community-acquired viral pneumonia. Before that, influenza type A and type B were the most common causes of community-acquired viral pneumonia. Coming to its histology, in histology we will be able to see the thickened alveolar wall, which is infiltrated with lymphocytes, and in gross we are able to see the red, blue, and congestion. Other type of pneumonia include the cryptogenic organizing pneumonia, which is most often seen as a response to infection, which can be bacterial or viral. Bacterial or viral infection are the most common causes of pneumonia, or can be due to inflammatory injury, which can be due to inhaled toxin, drugs, and connective tissue diseases. In microscopy, we'll be able to see two things. First is the Mason bodies that is visible on the left side, and on the right side, we are able to see the foamy macrophages. So Mason bodies are nothing but a collection of fibroblasts, whereas foamy macrophages are responsible to clearing the debris out. For the summary, what all we have learned today is the definition of pneumonia, its classification, along with the sequential stages of lobar pneumonia, with its gross and microscopy, and the clinical aspect and complications of pneumonia. These are the references. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ujjwal Jandu from 2024 MBBS batch, and today I will be presenting on the topic etiological agents of pneumonia. This presentation has been prepared by Priyal Chaudhary, Raja Singh Tawar, Vishwesh Singhal, Aryan Yadav, and myself, Ujjwal, under the guidance of Dr. Ved Prakash Mamoria, Professor and Head Department of Microbiology, and moderated by Dr. Shweta Kataria, Associate Professor, Department of Microbiology. Today's learning objective are classification of pneumonia and etiological agents of pneumonia. So, as earlier discussed, what is pneumonia? Pneumonia is an infection of lung parenchyma which is characterized by inflammation of alveoli. It is caused by various infectious agents, and the etiological agents may vary with age, immune status, and whether the infection is community acquired or hospital acquired. The risk factors for pneumonia include children less than 2 years of age, the patients with history of splenectomy, sickle cell disease, and other hemoglobinopathies, viral upper respiratory tract infections, and underlying comorbid diseases like chronic lung disease, chronic renal disease, chronic liver disease, diabetes mellitus, and immunosuppression. Now, etiological agents of pneumonia. Traditionally, pneumonia is classified into typical and atypical pneumonia based on the area of lung involved and the type of cough produced. So the first one is typical pneumonia. It involves infection of the lung parenchyma and its alveoli. That's why it is also known as lobar pneumonia or alveolar pneumonia. It is characterized by consolidation, and the patients usually present with productive cough and purulent sputum. The typical pneumonia is primarily caused by bacterial pathogen, which are classified into two categories, gram-positive bacteria and gram-negative bacteria. Among gram-positive bacteria, the most common being Streptococcus pneumoniae, which is the most leading cause of pneumonia especially among children, and it is followed by Staphylococcus aureus, which is the most virulent Staphylococcus, which causes infection ranging from localized pyogenic to the life-threatening systemic infections in humans. Among gram-negative bacteria, they are further classified into lactose fermenters and non-lactose fermenters. The lactose fermenters include Escherichia coli, Klebsiella pneumoniae, Haemophilus influenzae, which is common among children, and Enterobacter species, and Serratia marcescens. Among non-lactose fermenters, they include Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Acinetobacter baumannii complex, Burkholderia cepacia complex. Burkholderia infections are usually associated with cystic fibrosis patients. Rare causes of typical pneumonia includes Bacillus anthrax, Yersinia pestis, Nocardia species, Actinomyces species, Streptococcus pyogenes, Streptococcus escherichia, non-typhoidal salmonella, Aeromonas hydrophila, and Moraxella catarrhalis. Now moving towards atypical pneumonia, it is an infection located within the lung interstitial tissue, so it is also known as interstitial pneumonia, and patient usually present with dry and non-productive cough. Now, atypical pneumonia has various causes, various bacteria, viral and fungus and parasites. Among bacterial causes, the most common being Mycoplasma pneumoniae, followed by Chlamydia species, in which Chlamydia trachomatis, mainly associated with infant pneumonia, and followed by Legionella species, and they mainly inhibit water sources like air conditioners and water coolers. And the least common causes include Coxiella burnetii and Francisella and Orantia species. Among viral causes, it includes influenza virus, coronavirus, respiratory syncytial virus, parainfluenza virus, adenovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, and rhinovirus. Moving towards the rare causes of atypical pneumonia, although various fungus and parasites involves the lung, but very few of them leads to pneumonia. Among them, the fungal causes are Pneumocystis jirovecii, Aspergillus species, which causes chronic necrotizing pneumonia, and Mucor species. Among parasite causes, the most common being Toxoplasma gondii, Toxocara species, and hookworm, with both of these causes eosinophilic pneumonia. Now, as per NIM classification, the pneumonia is classified into two categories: community-acquired pneumonia and hospital-acquired pneumonia. Community-acquired pneumonia is an acute infection of the lung parenchyma occurring in a person who has not been hospitalized or lived in a healthcare facility within previous 14 days, or that develops within 48 hours of hospital admission. The pneumonia patients are categorized into three categories: OPD patients, non-ICU IPD patients, and ICU patients. In OPD patients, the bacterial causes include most common being Streptococcus pneumoniae, followed by Mycoplasma pneumoniae, Haemophilus influenzae, and Chlamydia pneumoniae. In non-ICU IPD patients, the bacterial causes are almost similar to that of OPD patients, with addition of Legionella species. In ICU patients, the bacterial causes include Streptococcus pneumoniae, Staphylococcus aureus, Legionella species, gram-negative bacilli, and Haemophilus influenzae. The respiratory viruses are common among all three categories, and they include influenza A and B, parainfluenza virus, rhinovirus, adenovirus, and human metapneumovirus. The second one is hospital-acquired pneumonia. It is a pneumonia that has developed 48 hours or more after the admission, which was not incubating at the time of admission. Ventilator-associated pneumonia is a subtype of hospital-acquired pneumonia that has developed more than 48 hours after endotracheal intubation. Most often caused by multidrug-resistant pathogens found in hospital environment. The multidrug-resistant pathogens are mainly associated with ventilator-associated pneumonia, and they include Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Escherichia coli, Acinetobacter baumannii complex, and MRSA, which is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. Non-multidrug resistant pathogens include Streptococcus pneumoniae, other Streptococcus species, Haemophilus influenzae, MSSA, which is methicillin-sensitive Staphylococcus aureus, and antibiotic-sensitive Enterobacteriales. Other pathogens include anaerobes such as Propobacterium and Aspergillus species. As for summary, for typical pneumonia, the most common cause is Streptococcus pneumoniae, which is a gram-positive bacteria, followed by Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is a gram-negative non-lactose fermenter, and followed by Klebsiella pneumoniae, which is gram-negative lactose fermenter. For atypical pneumonia, Mycoplasma pneumonia, followed by Chlamydia and Legionella species. Fungal and parasitic causes are usually associated with atypical pneumonia, and viruses are predominantly associated with atypical pneumonia and community-acquired pneumonia. For ventilator-associated pneumonia, most common agents are multidrug-resistant pathogens. These are the references. Now I would like to hand over the mic to the pharmacology department.
Thank you, Ujjwal. Good morning, dignitaries, esteemed faculties and colleagues. We are representing the Department of Pharmacology in the 22nd undergraduate combined rounds. on topic pharmacotherapy of pneumonia, presented by. This presentation is prepared by Justin W. Pathak, Aniket Vyas, Puneet Tapan, Princy Verma, and myself, Akshita Goyal, under the guidance of Dr. Anusha Vora ma'am, Professor and Head Department of Pharmacology, and under the moderatorship of Dr. Vinay Kumar Gupta, sir, Associate Professor, Pharmacology. These are the learning objectives, management options, antimicrobial killings, the gram-negative bacteria and gram-positive bacteria, using empirical antimicrobial therapy, choosing definitive therapy following the microbiology culture and sensitivity report, treatment of community-acquired pneumonia, newer antimicrobials, and treatment of viral pneumonia. Pharmacotherapy. Why do we need the treatment of pneumonia? First, to eradicate the positive organisms from the site and reverse the inflammatory process. Prevent complications, reduce potentially fatal, and prevent the mortality rate. Management options are outpatient, inpatient wards, ICU. Outpatient management in empirical therapy, the drugs are amoxicillin, combination of amoxicillin and clavulanic acid, macrolide, doxycycline, and fluoroquinolone. These drugs can be given singly and in combination therapy. These are the positive common microbes. Inpatient management, in empirical therapy, the drugs are combination of amoxicillin, clavulanic acid, macrolide, third generation cephalosporins, fluoroquinolone. Important note to be, injectable drugs are used initially. Combination of drugs are preferred in elderly, diabetic, alcoholism, and those with structured lung diseases. Cephalosporins are preferred. ICU management in empirical therapy, the drugs are combination of amoxicillin, clavulanic acid, macrolide, third and fourth generation cephalosporins, fluoroquinolones, aminoglycosides, carbapenems. Vancomycin or teicoplanin are given in case of gram-positive bacteria. Metronidazole and clindamycin are given in protozoa-causing pneumonia. After giving the drug, wait for 48 to 72 hours for the drug to act before leaving the treatment failure. Antimicrobials covering the gram-negative bacteria include first beta-lactam or beta-lactamase inhibitors in which piperacillin, tazobactam, cefoperazone, sulbactam or tiacylin tablet are given. Second class includes carbapenems in which meropenem, ipipenem are there. Third, anti-pseudomonal cephalosporins include cefepime or cefepime. Fourth, anti-pseudomonal quinolones include ciprofloxacin and levofloxacin. Fourth, anti-pseudomonal aminoglycosides include amikacin, netamycin, and tobramycin. Last, polymyxin, in which polycysteine and polymyxin D is there. Polymyxin category belongs to the reserved category of drug according to the WHO. Fourth, antimicrobials covering the gram-positive bacteria include the anti-MRSA drug in which vancomycin, teicoplanin, linezolid are given. Among these, linezolid is a reserved category drug. Generally, 7 days of antimicrobials are sufficient. Once a stability criteria are met, patient can resist to oral antibiotics of the same group. Criteria for clinical stabilities are given below. 4 out of 5 criteria ensures the clinical stability. Empirical antimicrobial therapy. Prompt initiation of empirical antimicrobial therapy based on hospital antibiogram antimicrobial stewardship approach. Now let's see what microbes are present in our hospital. Sputum samples suggest common organisms are Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, E. coli, and Cyanobacter. Interpreting the antimicrobial culture and sensitivity report, according to the antibiogram, the drug of choice order is first is polycythene, followed by meropenem, ipipenem, cefepime, amikacin or gentamicin, cefoperazone, sulbactam or piperacillin tazobactam as the last drug of choice. As per the antimicrobial stewardship approach, we should safeguard the polycysteine, which is the reserved drug to minimize its exposure to organism. The choice of drug are first is cefoperazone or cefoperazone, sulbactam or piperacillin tazobactam, and the last one is a polycythene. Treatment of community-acquired pneumonia in OPD and IPD wards. Pneumonia without comorbidities, OPD management. Amoxicillin is given as the first line of drug. With comorbidities, OPD management includes the amoxicillin tablet with combination of doxycycline or azithromycin as the first line of drug. In patient ward, cephalosporin given with combination with azithromycin or doxycycline. Hospital antibiogram for ICU for respiratory specimens suggests that the common organisms are Acinetobacter, Klebsiella, E. coli, Pseudomonas, or Staphylococcus aureus. Interpreting the antimicrobial culture and sensitivity report for ICU, According to the antibiogram, the drug of choice is cholecystine, and it is the only last and first and last drug of choice with 99% susceptibility. Why has one antimicrobial keyword approach? We should say that the cholecystine is the reserved drug to so minimizing exposure to organisms while giving combination therapy. The choice of drug first is minoxidil with cholecystine, and the last one is amikacin and cholecystine. Amikacin and cholecystine is the last is highly nephrotoxic drugs. Definitive therapy. Switch to definitive therapy following the microbiology culture and sensitivity report. This is the report. It is a culture and sensitivity report of endotracheal surgery. The positive organism is a Staphylococcus aureus, which is MRSA. The drug of choice can be Linezolid, teicoplanin, vancomycin, tigecycline. And as per antimicrobial stewardship approach, choice of drug is first is vancomycin, second teicoplanin, third tigecycline, and fourth is Linezolid. Among these, tigecycline and Linezolid comes in the reserved category of drug. Treatment of community-acquired pneumonia in ICU. In patient ICU, first line of drug is ceftazidime with combination with azithromycin or doxycycline. In patient ICU with risk factor for Pseudomonas aeruginosa, first line of drug includes praseodymium tazobactam in combination with azithromycin or doxycycline. In ventilator-acquired pneumonia, the first line of drug is piperacillin tazobactam or ceftriaxone sulbactam. Ventilator-acquired patients with recent exposure to beta-lactamase or beta-lactamase inhibitors, includes of meropenem or ipipenem, polymyxin D, and polycystine. Among these, polymyxin D and polycystine belongs to the reserved category of drugs. Range of role with newer antimicrobials. Newer antimicrobials used in ammonia are first ceftolozane and tazobactam, second ceftazidime or avibactam, third meropenem avibactam, fourth ipipenem or avibactam, fifth ceftriaxone, sixth dapivirine, seventh omidacillin, eighth Delacloxin, and ninth nifurthromycin. Among the drugs approved drugs in India are ceftazidime, avibactam, and nifurthromycin. Treatment of viral pneumonia is mainly supportive, and antiviral drugs are used only for specific viruses. In antiviral therapy for influenza virus, oseltamivir and zanamivir are given. For COVID-19 cases, remdesivir is used, and herpes simplex virus or varicella virus, acyclovir is used, and cytomegalovirus, ganciclovir is used. Antibiotics and corticosteroids are not routinely used. Preventions, vaccination, hand hygiene, mask, avoiding infected contacts. To summarize all, empirical antimicrobial therapy to be chosen judicially, keeping in view the reserved antimicrobials. Definitive therapy should be given once the cultural sensitivity reports are available. Antimicrobials to be given for 5 to 7 days depending on the clinical stability criteria. Outpatient, inpatient ward or ICU have different antimicrobial therapies based on the microorganisms and the type and patient risk factors. These are the references. Now I would like to call Saloni Atra for continue the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshata. Good morning, everyone. I, Saloni Atre, along with my colleagues Arul Jain, Pearl Samaria, Yash Khandelwal, and Garv Agarwal, are here to present on the topic chest X-ray and HRCT patterns seen in pneumonia. This presentation is made under the guidance of Dr. Paresh Kumar Sukhani Sir, HOD Department of Radiodiagnosis, and under the moderatorship of Dr. Jay Chaudhary Sir, Professor, Department of Radiodiagnosis. This is the learning objectives of our today's presentation. Before discussing about the specific patterns of X-ray seen in the pneumonia, let us have a brief view of the normal chest X-ray. This is the PA view of the normal chest X-ray in which trachea is placed centrally, carina is visible, the lung field is clear, bronchiovascular margins are well defined, the left and right costophrenic angles are well defined and sharp, the left and right hemidiaphragms are also visible. Any deviation from these normal findings help us to identify the pathological changes seen in the imaging patterns of pneumonia and other respiratory diseases. This is, as mentioned earlier, the etiological classification of pneumonia is bacterial pneumonia, viral pneumonia, fungal pneumonia, atypical pneumonia, and tubercular pneumonia. In this presentation, we will be discussing about the various imaging patterns seen in viral, bacterial, and fungal pneumonia. We will not cover atypical and tubercular pneumonia in detail. This is the classic chest X-ray and HRCT findings seen in the viral pneumonia. The AP view of the chest X-ray shows bilateral haziness in the lower lung zones with prominent interstitial markings. The HRCT here shows bilateral ground glass opacity, which appear as hazy area of increased lung attenuation with visible vascular bronchial markings. This is the chest X-ray and HRCT findings seen in the bacterial pneumonia. Here, the AP view of the chest shows air bronchogram, which refers to visualization of air-filled bronchioles surrounding against the opacified alveoli. It occurs due to as airways remains patent while the alveoli are filled with inflammatory exudate. It is typically seen in Streptococcus and Klebsiella pneumonia. The HRCT here shows bilateral homogeneous opacity along with air bronchogram. My right side X-ray is the PA view of chest showing consolidation, which represents the area of lung parenchyma that is solid and radioplane. It occurs due to alveolar filling with pus, blood cells, and fluids. Radiographically, it appears as homogeneous opacity, often showing air bronchogram. This is a hallmark feature of bacterial pneumonia. The left side X-ray is the AP view showing a child's chest X-ray having round pneumonia, which occurs as a spherical, well-defined opacity, often mimicking a coil lesion. It is typically seen in the children having underdeveloped collateral ventilation. Now, this is the chest X-ray and HRCT findings seen in pneumatocele, which is a thin-walled air-filled cystic lesion present within the lung parenchyma. It is most commonly associated with Staphylococcus aureus pneumonia. My right side X-ray is the AP view of chest showing bulging fissure sign, which occurs due to outward convex bowing of the interlobar fissure due to massive lobar consolidation. It is a classical feature associated with Klebsiella pneumonia. The left side chest X-ray is the PA view of the chest showing Silhouette sign, which occurs due to loss of interface between the lung and the adjacent soft tissue structure. This sign helps in localizing the affected lobe on the chest X-ray. This is a classic HRCT showing pre-in-birth appearance, which represents impacted and inflamed small airways, specifically bronchioles. It appears as centrilobular nodules with branching linear opacity resembling budding tree. It is a radiographical feature of tuberculosis, also seen with bacterial infection caused by Staphylococcus aureus, Haemophilus influenza, with viral infections caused by cytomegalovirus, and with fungal infection caused by Aspergillus species. This is the classic chest X-ray and HRCT findings seen in fungal pneumonia. The PA view of the chest X-ray shows tubular branching opacity, which occur due to filling of bronchioles with mucus and fungal elements. This indicates air-centered fungal infection. The HRCT here shows glove and finger sign, which is due to mucoid impaction within the dilated bronchioles. It is classically seen with allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis. This chest X-ray is the PA view showing fungal ball, which appears as a cavity lesion in the right middle zone of the lung, and a mobile homogeneous tissue which is separated by crescent tail. The HRCT finding here shows monod sign, which represents the air surrounding of the fungal ball in pre-existing cavity. It is associated with aspergilloma. This is the classic chest HRCT showing halo sign, which appears as a modular consolidation surrounded by ground glass opacity. It is most commonly associated with angio-invasive aspergillosis. Before ending, I would like to brief about the complications of pneumonia seen in the chest X-ray. The first is the pleural effusion, which appears as homogeneous opacity with obscuring costophrenic angles. The next is the lymphadenopathy, in which there is large mediastinal lymph nodes which are present bilaterally. This is the summary to my presentation. The take-home message is chest X-ray remains the first-line imaging modality in suspected pneumonia. Knowledge of normal chest X-ray anatomy is essential for the detection of pathology. Characteristic imaging patterns help to differentiate viral pneumonia presented with ground glass opacity, bilateral pneumonia having consolidation and air bronchogram, fungal pneumonia having halo sign and air crescent sign, and tree-in-bud sign which appears in all the three pneumonias. HRCT provides superior anatomical detail, especially in atypical cases and complications. Early radiological diagnosis plays a crucial role in timely management and improved patient outcomes. These are the references to my presentation. Now I would like to call Mansi for medicine department. Thank you, Saloni. A very pleasant morning to all my respected seniors, curious juniors, and my dear colleagues. Today I, Mansi Mahela, will give a presentation on the topic classification, clinical features, differential diagnosis, and management of pneumonia. I will be representing my team, which includes Harshit Yadav, Apurva Khichi, Sahil Yadav, and Nikhil Hindonia. The presentation was made under the guidance of Dr. Puneet Rijwani Sir, Professor and Head, Department of General Medicine, and under the moderatorship of Dr. Arushi Chaudhary Ma'am and Dr. Mahima Anija Ma'am. This will be the basic outline of our presentation today. Lower respiratory tract infections remain a major cause of hospital admissions, with pneumonia being the most significant among them. It is a common and potentially serious infectious disease involving the pulmonary parenchyma. It is characterized by the proliferation of microbial pathogens within the alveoli, along with the host's inflammatory response, leading to impaired gaseous exchange. Based on the setting in which the infection is acquired, pneumonia is broadly classified into three types. Community-acquired pneumonia or CAP, which occurs in patients not hospitalized or in a long-term care facility in the previous 14 days. Hospital-acquired pneumonia or HAP, which develops 48 hours or more after hospital admission and not incubating at the time of admission, and ventilator-acquired pneumonia or VAP, which occurs after 48 hours or more on mechanical ventilation. This classification is clinically important as it helps predict the likely causative organism and guides the choice of empirical antibiotic therapy. With this background, I will now move on to the clinical manifestations of pneumonia. Patients with pneumonia typically present with a combination of constitutional and respiratory symptoms. The patient is frequently febrile, often associated with chills and rigors. This is usually accompanied by cough, which may be non-productive or productive, with mucoid, purulent, or occasionally blood-tinged sputum. Patients may also complain of pleuritic chest pain and dyspnea, particularly in moderate to severe disease. And Ross morphosis, if seen, may be suggestive of necrotizing pneumonia due to community-acquired MRSA. Some patients may have GI symptoms such as nausea or vomiting, while elderly patients may present atypically, with confusion, delirium, or altered sensorium being the only presenting features. On physical examination, patients are found to be tachypneic and tachycardic with the evidence of hypoxia, as reflected by the reduced oxygen saturation. And in severe disease, patients may be cyanotic or show features of septic shock and organ dysfunction. On respiratory system examination, inspection may reveal tachypnea, use of accessory muscles, and reduced chest movements on the affected side. And palpation may reveal reduced chest expansion with increased or decreased tactile vocal tremulous. Percussion note can vary from dull to flat, reflecting underlying consolidated lung and pleural fluid respectively. And on auscultation, bronchial breath sounds, crackles, and increased vocal resonance may be heard. In view of these overlapping clinical features, it is important to consider the differential diagnosis of pneumonia, which may be infectious or non-infectious. Infectious conditions include acute bronchitis, pulmonary tuberculosis, and lung abscess, while the non-infectious causes include congestive heart failure, pulmonary embolism, acute exacerbations of asthma or COPD, and ARDS. Therefore, clinical correlation with imaging and investigations is essential for accurate diagnosis. Once pneumonia is clinically suspected, the next step is to confirm the diagnosis and identify the etiology, which brings us to the diagnostic protocol. The diagnosis of pneumonia is based on a combination of clinical features, radiological evidence, and supportive laboratory findings. Let's begin with the clinical diagnosis first. While symptoms such as fever, cough, and dyspnea raise the suspicion, radiological confirmation is mandatory, most commonly with a chest X-ray showing new infiltrates and consolidation, as told by the radiology department. The lung ultrasound may be used as an alternative showing D lines, while CT thorax is often reserved for diagnostic uncertainty and complications. The etiological diagnosis is established using the following. The main purpose of sputum gram staining is to ensure the suitability of a specimen for culture, And the greatest benefit of staining and culturing respiratory secretions is to alert the physician to an unexpected or resistant pathogens and to permit appropriate modification of therapy. The yield from blood cultures, even when samples are collected before antibiotic therapy, is very low, while PCR dramatically improves response times compared to standard cultures. And it is primarily used for viral infections like influenza or corona. However, it can also detect the nucleic acid of Legionella, Mycoplasma, Mycobacteria, etc. Serology shows elevated IgM titers, while biomarkers like ECT, ESR, and CRP are often found elevated as well. After diagnosing, let's take a look at the management of pneumonia. Firstly, we start with the risk stratification and choosing the site of care. The two most frequently used are the Pneumonia Severity Index or PSI, which is a prognostic model that identifies patients at a low risk of dying, and the Curve 65 criteria, which yields a severity of illness score. Curve 65 includes confusion, urea more than equal to 7 millimole per liter, respiratory rate more than equal to 30 breaths per minute, SBP less than 90 mmHg or DBP less than equal to 60 mmHg, and age more than equal to 65 years. TSI uses a total of 20 variables, including age, comorbidities, etc., to stratify patients into classes 1 through 5. Despite the greater efficacy of PSI, neither PSI nor Curve 65 is accurate in determining the need for ICU admission. So the criteria we actually use for severe CAP and ICU admission is as follows. The major criteria include respiratory failure requiring invasive mechanical ventilation and septic shock requiring vasopressors, while the minor criteria include respiratory rate more than equal to 30 breaths per minute, PF ratio less than equal to 250, multilobar infiltrates, confusion, disorientation, uremia, leukopenia, thrombocytopenia, hypothermia, and hypotension. Patients with any 3 out of the 9 minor criteria or any one major criteria should be admitted to the ICU and treated accordingly. Starting with the antibiotic therapy, we first give empirical therapy. The goals of empirical treatment are coverage of common CAP pathogens and minimize unnecessary broad spectrum antibiotic use and limit the emergence of antimicrobial resistance. We are giving special attention to antimicrobial resistance as it is a significant problem in CAP due to antibiotic misuse and increased selection pressure. In outpatient care, patients can present with either no comorbidities like chronic liver, lung, or renal disease or diabetes, or risk factors like previous isolation of MRSA or Pseudomonas due to pneumonia within the last year, or hospitalization of parental antibiotic therapy in the last 90 days, in which case we give amoxicillin plus either a macrolide or doxycycline, or monotherapy with macrolide or monotherapy with doxycycline. Or the patient can present with comorbidities where we give amoxiclav plus or cephalosporin plus either a macrolide or doxycycline, or monotherapy with respiratory fluoroquinolones. In inpatient care, CAP without risk factors can be divided into non-severe and severe. For non-severe cases, we give beta-lactam plus macrolide or simply a monotherapy with respiratory fluoroquinolones. And for severe CAP, we give beta-lactam plus macrolide or beta-lactam plus fluoroquinolones. For CAP with risk factors, we give specific coverage from MRSA in the form of vancomycin or linezolid, or Pseudomonas coverage in the form of piperacillin, tazobactam, or imipenem or meropenem. Management of VAP differs from management of CAP because of a higher risk of infection with multi-drug resistant pathogens and higher rates of mortality. If there are no risk factors for resistant gram-negative pathogens, we just give single drug therapy with one anti-pseudomonal agent in the form of piptaz or cefepime. If risk factors for such pathogens are present, we give combination therapy with 2 anti-pseudomonal agents, one from the beta-lactam class and one from another class. And if MRSA risk factors are present as well, we give coverage with linezolid or adjusted dose of vancomycin. In some cases, the patient may land up into complications. These can be pulmonary or local in the form of parapneumonic pleural effusion, empyema, necrotizing pneumonia, lung abscess, etc. Or they can be extrapulmonary or systemic in the form of respiratory failure, ARDS, septic shock, DIC, and MORS. The minimum duration of therapy is 5 days, provided the patient is clinically stable. But prolonged therapy may be required in some cases. The IV to oral switch, which can be done when the patient is stable and able to ingest and absorb oral medications. Adjunctive measures may be needed in some cases, like refractory septic shock, where we give corticosteroids. The follow-up includes clinical aspect, where we monitor the vitals, assess the resolution of symptoms, and radiological follow-up, which may be done in hospitalized or recurrent cases. To conclude, this flowchart summarizes the complete clinical approach to pneumonia. A patient typically presents with fever, cough, dyspnea, or delirium, especially in the elderly. On examination, we may find tachypnea, hypoxia, dullness on percussion, and bronchial breath sounds. The diagnosis is made by correlating clinical findings with mandatory radiological evidence and laboratory markers. Once pneumonia is confirmed, patients are risk stratified using CURB 65 PSI or the criteria for CEVA-CAP, which helps in deciding the site of care, that is outpatient, inpatient ward or ICU. And based on this, empirical antibiotic therapy is initiated, in which lower risk CAP patients are treated as outpatient with amoxiclav or amoxicillin plus azithromycin or respiratory fluoroquinolones. IPT patients require a beta-lactam plus macrolide or fluoroquinolone. And severe CAP, ICU, or those with MDR risk require broad spectrum coverage such as Piptaz, Ciprophyme, etc., with MRSA coverage using vancomycin and linezolid wherever necessary. Patients are reassessed after 48 to 72 hours for clinical and radiological improvement, followed by IV to oral switch and de-escalation based on cultures. Finally, complications like pleural effusion, empyema, ARDS, and sepsis are monitored for, along with appropriate supportive care, including oxygen therapy and corticosteroids whenever indicated. Thus, early diagnosis, risk-based management, and timely treatment form the cornerstone of reducing morbidity and mortality in pneumonia. Thank you.